The gavel cracked against the wooden bench. And the sound wasn't just loud, it was final. Like a coffin slamming shut. My chest tightened as though every beat of my heart echoed through this cold Boston courtroom. My mother has kept my children for 13 years without my consent. My daughter declared, her voice sharp as broken glass. This is parental kidnapping. That word, kidnapping, stabbed me harder than any knife. I am Margaret Cole, 67 years old, and I sat there with nothing but my wrinkled hands clutching a yellow envelope I'd guarded for over a decade. To Monica, the woman who once curled in my lap with scraped knees, I was now the villain. She looked immaculate, polished in her navy suit, hair pulled tight like she was on the cover of a magazine. Beside her lounged Richard Hale, her lawyer, smirking as if the case were already won. Behind me, my 3 grandchildren, David, 20, Rachel, 18, Sophie, 16, sat frozen. They looked like strangers in a theater, watching a horror movie they didn't sign up for. Judge William Grant, gray-haired and grave-eyed, leaned forward. His voice came out calm, but weighted with authority. Mrs. Cole, what do you have to say to these accusations? The words pressed against my throat like fire. For 13 years I had swallowed them. Now they came out, firm and sharp. With respect, Your Honor, I didn't kidnap anyone. I raised the children my daughter left crying on my doorstep. The gallery gasped. Monica shot to her feet, pointing at me with trembling fingers. That's a lie. I was sick. I needed help. She trapped me, took advantage of me. The room buzzed with whispers. Hale shuffled his papers with a smirk. The judge's eyes cut into me. Waiting. Slowly, I lifted the yellow envelope, holding it high enough for Monica to see. For the first time, her confidence cracked. Her eyes widened, not with fury, but with fear. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady as steel. This envelope doesn't just contain documents. It contains the truth. And once it's opened, I glanced at my daughter, whose face had drained of color. This courtroom will never look at her the same way again. The silence was suffocating. Even the judge's gavel hovered in midair, as if afraid to break it. Because when this envelope opens, everything explodes. The clerk's shoes clicked across the marble as I placed the yellow envelope into his hands. My fingers lingered on it for half a second longer than they should have, as if I were releasing not just papers, but 13 years of sleepless nights and unanswered prayers. The envelope landed on the judge's desk with a soft thud. But it may as well have been dynamite. Judge Grant slid out the first stack, tied with a faded red ribbon. Photographs. Mrs. Cole, he said, adjusting his glasses. Describe what we're seeing. My throat tightened as the images faced the court. The first photo, David at 7 years old. Clothes ripped, shoes so worn that daylight streamed through the soles. The second, Rachel, just 5, her little face streaked with dried food, her hair a tangled nest. The third, Sophie, barely 3, wearing a diaper so heavy it sagged like a stone. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Someone muttered, "My God." I steadied my voice. These are the children as they appeared the day my daughter left them with me. Hungry, dirty, terrified. Monica slapped her palm against the table. That's not true. She staged those photos to make me look bad. The judge raised his hand. Order. Sit down, Mrs. Cole. But I wasn't done. My hands trembled as I pointed to the next item the clerk held, a stack of handwritten letters. And these, Your Honor, are my daughter's own words. Letters she sent me in the first 6 months after abandoning her children. Monica's face drained of color. She shook her head so hard her earrings rattled. Don't read those. The judge ignored her protest and motioned for the clerk to continue. The lawyer, Richard Hale, grabbed one of the letters. Scanning the page, his smug expression evaporated like steam on cold glass. I looked directly at Monica. Shall I read them for you, daughter? Or would you prefer your lawyer to do it? The audience leaned forward in unison, hungry for the storm about to break. The judge cleared his throat. Proceed, Mrs. Cole. Read the first letter aloud. I took the paper from the clerk. Its edges curled from years tucked away in my drawer. My hands trembled, but my voice cut clean through the silence. Dated 3 weeks after she left her children. I began. My daughter Monica wrote this. Mom, I've met a man named Javier. He doesn't want the burden of raising someone else's kids. Please keep them a little longer while I start fresh. I'll come back when things are better." The gallery gasped. Someone whispered, "She chose a man over her own children." Rachel covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Sophie hugged herself the way she used to at 3 years old when she was scared. And David, my sweet David, sat stiff, jaw clenched, his eyes locked on Monica. The judge leaned forward, his tone heavy. "Mrs. Cole, are these letters unquestionably written by your daughter?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied firmly. I'd know her handwriting anywhere. "And these are only the beginning." Richard Hale shifted in his seat, papers trembling in his hand. He tried to object, but his words stuck in his throat like dry bread. Monica slammed her palms on the table. "I was sick. I wasn't myself. Those words don't count." I looked straight at her. "You were well enough to choose Javier. Well enough to start a new life. Well enough to decide your children didn't fit in it." The courtroom erupted in whispers again, the air thick with disbelief. The judge tapped his gavel once, his eyes sharp. "Continue, Mrs. Cole. What do the other letters say?" I pressed the second letter to my chest for a moment before speaking. "This one," I thought, "will gut her story completely." I unfolded the second letter slowly, the paper whispering like it knew its secrets were about to ruin someone. My voice, though soft, carried through the courtroom like a bell. "This letter," I said, "was written 2 months after Monica left the children. Mom, I'm pregnant with Javier's baby. He says we can't bring the past into our future. Please don't expect me to return for David, Rachel, and Sophie. They'll be better off with you. I'll send money when I can." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Gasps broke out again. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others leaned forward as if they'd just watched a knife sink into someone's chest. David's knuckles went white, gripping the wooden pew. His voice cracked as he whispered, "She had another child, and she kept him." Rachel buried her face in her hands. Sophie turned away from the front, her shoulders shaking silently. Monica stood, her face blotched red, her eyes wild. "That's not fair." I was confused. I didn't know what I was saying. The judge's gavel slammed. Bang. "Sit down, Mrs. Cole," he ordered. "This court will hear the evidence in full." Her lawyer, Richard Hale, looked like a man realizing the ship he boarded was already sinking. He tugged at his tie, sweating under the fluorescent lights. I lifted the third letter, my hand steady now. The fear had burned out of me, leaving only resolve. "And this one," I said, locking eyes with Monica, "is the last letter I ever received from her. It was her final goodbye." Monica's lips parted. For the first time, I saw something in her eyes, not rage, not defiance, but raw panic. "Your Honor," I continued, "if the court allows, I will read aloud the words that sealed my daughter's absence for the next 13 years. The audience hushed. The only sound left was the faint scratching of Judge Grant's pen as he leaned forward. "Ready." I held the third letter in my hands. The ink faded but still cruelly clear. My voice wavered only for a heartbeat, then steadied. Dated 6 months after she left her children. I read aloud, "Mom, I can't keep living 2 lives. I need you to sign papers saying you'll take responsibility for David, Rachel, and Sophie. I'll send you $500 for your trouble. I don't want them following me into my new life. Tell them their mother had to go far away for work." The words sliced through the courtroom like a cold wind. Rachel's sob cracked the silence, sharp as glass. David shut his eyes tight, his jaw trembling. Sophie hugged her knees to her chest on the bench, whispering, "She sold us off for $500. Gasps rippled through the gallery. A woman in the back muttered, "Lord have mercy." Judge Grant removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. His voice was low, heavy. "Mrs. Cole, are you telling this court that your daughter offered to pay you off in exchange for abandoning her children permanently?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My eyes never left Monica's face. "And this letter was the last contact I had from her for 13 years. Monica leapt to her feet, her voice shrill, desperate. "I was sick. I didn't mean it. I wasn't myself. I had depression, anxiety, everything." The judge's gavel thundered. Bang, bang. Silence. "Mrs. Cole, sit down immediately." But she kept shouting, wild now, tears streaking down her makeup. She twisted my words. "Those letters don't show the whole truth. I loved my children. I slammed the letter down on the stand, my voice cutting through her cries. Then why, Monica, why did you never call at Christmas? Why no birthday cards? Why no doctor's visits? No school meetings? No late-night fevers? Love doesn't vanish for 13 years. The courtroom roared with whispers. Even Richard Hale, her lawyer, sat stone-faced, staring at the letter in his hands like it was a blade pressed against his career. Judge Grant leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Mrs. Cole, do you have anything else in that envelope? I looked down at the thick stack of documents still inside. The envelope felt lighter in my hands now. But what remained could crush Monica's entire case in one strike. Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice calm as iron. I have one more document. And it will explain everything. The envelope crinkled as I reached to its bottom, my fingers brushing the folded sheet I had read 100 times but never dared speak aloud. I pulled it free, its creases deep, the paper yellowed from years of hiding. This, I said, holding it high so the judge and every pair of eyes could see, is the document my daughter wrote and signed 3 days after she left her children. Monica shot to her feet. Panic splashed across her face. No, don't you dare. Judge Grant's gavel cracked the air. Bang. Sit down, Mrs. Cole. I handed the sheet to the clerk, who carried it to the bench. Judge Grant unfolded it slowly, his expression tightening with every line he read. The gallery craned their necks, whispers hissing like snakes. The judge looked up, his voice grave. Mrs. Cole, are you stating this is written in your daughter's own hand? Yes, Your Honor. I found it among the belongings she left behind in her abandoned apartment. The landlady gave it to me. Read it aloud, the judge commanded. I took the paper back, my hand trembling but my voice strong. I, Monica Cole, 26 years old, voluntarily relinquish all parental rights to my children. David Cole, age 7, Rachel Cole, age 5, and Sophie Cole, age 3. I acknowledge I cannot provide for them emotionally, financially, or psychologically. I authorize my mother, Margaret Cole, to make all decisions regarding their lives. I waive all rights to custody, visitation, or claim. This decision is final and irrevocable. Signed, Monica Cole. October 15, 2011. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Gasps erupted. Someone in the gallery whispered. She gave them up, in writing. David shot forward on the bench, fists clenched. Rachel shook her head in disbelief, tears sliding down her cheeks. Sophie mouthed the words silently, final and irrevocable. Monica collapsed into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably, her face buried in her trembling hands. Her lawyer grabbed the document with pale fingers, his lips moving silently as he read and reread, as if hoping the words might change. Judge Grant leaned forward, his eyes like steel. Mrs. Cole, do you have witnesses to confirm this was written voluntarily? Yes, Your Honor, I replied. The landlady who saw her request pen and paper that very day. She can testify that my daughter was calm, coherent, and deliberate. The judge turned sharply toward Monica. Mrs. Cole, do you deny writing this? Monica's voice cracked, ragged. I was sick. I didn't know what I was doing. I was not in my right mind. The judge's gaze hardened. Then explain how. 2 months later, you had the legal capacity to marry Mr. Javier Dawson. Monica froze. The courtroom roared with whispers again. A storm of disbelief and condemnation. Judge Grant's words cracked across the room like thunder. You claim you were too unstable to understand relinquishing your children, yet 2 months later, you were sound enough to stand before a clerk and sign a marriage license. Which is it, Mrs. Cole? Monica's mouth opened, but no words came. Her lawyer, Richard Hale, scrambled to his feet. Your Honor, my client's condition fluctuated. Depression can impair judgment. The judge's gavel struck hard. Bang. Save the textbook. Mr. Hale, I've reviewed her medical records. They state she was discharged as mentally stable weeks before this so-called crisis. Do not insult this court. The gallery murmured louder, heads turning like a wave. Monica's shoulders collapsed under the weight of truth pressing down. I stood taller, holding my ground. Your Honor, my daughter was not confused. She was calculating. She chose convenience over her children. Richard Hale's face flushed, Objection. Speculation. The judge turned his tired, steel gray eyes on him. Overruled. The letters in this document speak for themselves. David suddenly rose from his seat in the gallery. Your Honor, may I speak? Gasps rippled. The judge hesitated, then nodded. Approach. Young man. David walked forward, his stride uncertain but his jaw firm. He was no longer the frightened boy I'd taken in 13 years ago, he was a man carrying scars in his chest. Standing at the witness stand. His voice wavered at first, then grew steady. I was 7 years old when my mother left us. I remember being hungry, cold, and confused. But I remember something else too, the night Grandma gave me clean clothes, food, and a bed that didn't smell of neglect. She never abandoned us. She saved us. The courtroom stilled. You could have heard the hum of the lights. He looked at Monica then, his eyes sharp but wet with pain. Mom, I don't hate you, but don't you dare stand here and say Grandma kidnapped us. She gave us a life when you wouldn't. Monica broke into sobs, rocking in her chair. Richard Hale stared at his shoes as if wishing the floor would swallow him whole. Judge Grant's voice softened. Thank you, David. You may return to your seat. But David shook his head, his voice firm now. No, Your Honor. With respect, I need to say one more thing. The gallery leaned forward, breaths held, as the grandson prepared to drop his truth like a hammer. David's hands gripped the wooden edge of the witness stand, knuckles white. His voice deepened, steady now, carrying through every corner of the courtroom. One more thing, Your Honor, he said. I want it on the record. My mother may have given me life, but my grandmother gave me everything else. She raised me, clothed me, fed me, cheered at every school game, sat with me through every fever. She is my real parent. The words struck like a lightning bolt. Gasps burst from the gallery. Someone whispered, that boy just chose sides. I felt tears burn my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. David turned, his gaze piercing Monica where she sat trembling. You think walking back into our lives after 13 years makes you a mother again? It doesn't. You can't erase birthdays you missed, dinners you skipped, or the nights I cried asking for you and only got silence. Grandma showed up when you didn't. She never stopped showing up. Monica shook her head violently, sobbing. David, please, you don't understand. I was sick. I couldn't. He cut her off, his voice sharp enough to slice. No, I understand perfectly. You chose another family. You raised another son. You were capable, you just didn't want us. The air in the courtroom was electric. Even the bailiff, who hadn't moved all morning, blinked hard and looked away. Judge Grant leaned forward, eyes heavy but soft with respect. Thank you, David. That was very clear. You may step down. David turned to look at me, his eyes full of quiet loyalty. Then he walked back to his seat beside Rachel and Sophie. Both reached for his hands, their faces wet with tears. The judge tapped his gavel lightly. Rachel Cole, please approach the stand. My granddaughter stood, tall and graceful at 18, but her shoulders shook with nerves. She walked to the front slowly, her shoes tapping against the floor in a rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. She looked at me, then at the judge, and drew a deep breath. Rachel took her place at the witness stand, her hands trembling as she adjusted the microphone. Her eyes flickered toward Monica, hesitant, almost searching, before settling on the judge. Your Honor, she began softly. I was 5 when my mom left us. I don't remember everything, but I remember enough. The courtroom hushed. Leaning in, Rachel's voice quivered. I remember days when she wouldn't get out of bed. I remember trying to make peanut butter sandwiches for my little sister because no one else would. And I remember being so hungry that my stomach hurt. Monica buried her face in her hands. Stop, she muttered, shaking her head. Please, stop. Rachel pressed on, her tone sharpening with each word. But I also remember the night Grandma opened her door to us. She gave us warm baths, clean pajamas, and chicken soup. She tucked us in with stories, the kind with happy endings I hadn't heard in a long time. Tears slipped down my cheeks then, I couldn't hold them back. Rachel looked directly at the judge, her voice steady now. When I was 14, I was diagnosed with diabetes. Do you know who learned how to test my blood, count carbs, and sit with me through low blood sugars at 3 a.m.? My grandmother. Not my mom. She didn't even call. The gallery erupted in murmurs. One man muttered, "That girl's telling the truth straight from her soul." Judge Grant raised his hand for silence, though his eyes were moist. "And what is your preference now? Rachel?" Rachel inhaled deeply, her jaw tightening. "My biological mother is a stranger to me. She shares my blood, but my grandmother shared my childhood. She shared my fears. She shared every single moment that mattered. For me, the choice is simple. I want to stay with Grandma." The words hung in the air like a verdict already passed. Monica let out a sob so raw it scraped the walls. "Rachel, please?" But Rachel didn't look at her. She stepped down, shoulders shaking, and returned to sit beside David and Sophie. The judge's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "Sophie Cole, please come forward." My youngest granddaughter stood, 16 years old, fiery spirit, eyes that mirrored mine in the mirror. She walked forward with her chin high, though her small fists were clenched tight at her sides. The whole courtroom leaned in, waiting for the youngest voice, the one too young to hide behind legal adulthood, but old enough to burn with truth. Sophie climbed onto the witness stand like she'd been preparing her whole life for this very moment. 16 years old, but her presence carried the weight of a storm. She adjusted the microphone, her eyes fixed on Judge Grant, not once glancing at Monica. "Your Honor," she said clearly, "I don't remember much about the house where my mother left us. But I remember the smell." The courtroom froze. Sophie's voice sharpened. "It smelled like sadness, like dirty laundry and old food. Like nobody cared." She swallowed hard. "I remember crying for hours and nobody coming. I remember being so hungry I licked crumbs off the floor. I was 3 years old." Monica clutched the table, her whole body shaking. "No, Sophie, no." Sophie turned at last, her gaze burning into Monica like fire. "And then I remember something else. The night Grandma took us in. She bathed me, wrapped me in pajamas that smelled like fabric softener, gave me warm milk with honey, and sang me to sleep. For the first time, I felt safe. For the first time, I felt loved." Gasps rolled through the gallery. Even the bailiff shifted, his jaw tight, eyes glassy. Judge Grant's voice was gentle. "And how do you feel now, Sophie? About your mother? About your grandmother?" Sophie's chin lifted, her voice ringing like a verdict. "I'm curious about the woman who gave me life. But I don't trust her. I don't believe her promises. She already left once. What stops her from leaving again? The only person I trust, the only person who's never left, is my grandma. That's who I choose." The words thundered louder than any gavel. Monica broke down completely, sobbing into her hands, her shoulders heaving. Richard Hale slumped beside her, defeated. The judge tapped his pen against his notes slowly, then looked up. His voice carried the weight of judgment. "Mrs. Cole," he said, turning toward me, "your grandchildren have spoken with clarity. But before this court renders a decision, is there anything else you wish to present?" I looked down at the yellow envelope still resting on the table. My heart pounded. Yes, there was more. The final piece. The one even my grandchildren didn't know about. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, standing. "There is one last truth this court must hear." The room tightened, breathless, every eye fixed on me as I reached for the last folded paper. My fingers lingered on the final fold of paper, the courtroom buzzing with expectation. This wasn't just another letter, it was the fuse to the powder keg. I lifted it slowly. "Your Honor, this document explains why my daughter suddenly appeared after 13 years of silence. It has nothing to do with love. It has everything to do with money." The gallery stirred like a hive. The judge's eyes sharpened. "Proceed." I unfolded the sheet. 3 months ago, my brother, Monica's uncle, passed away in Texas. He had no children. His will left a sizable inheritance to David, Rachel, and Sophie, $50,000 each. Gasps erupted. A man in the back muttered, "So that's why she came crawling back." I steadied my voice. "That inheritance is protected in a trust, set to release when each child turns 21. But it can only be managed by a legal guardian, a parent or myself." And just weeks after my brother's death, Monica resurfaced, with a lawyer at her side. Judge Grant leaned forward, his brows drawn tight. "Are you suggesting, Mrs. Cole, that this custody suit is motivated by financial gain rather than maternal concern?" I'm not suggesting it, I said, locking eyes with Monica. I'm proving it. I reached into my bag and handed the clerk another set of documents. These are private investigator reports. They show that 2.5 months ago, Monica hired Mr. Hale, not for a reunion, not for reconciliation, for one reason, to gain control of her children's inheritance. The courtroom roared with whispers. Richard Hale flushed crimson, yanking at his tie, but said nothing. Judge Grant scanned the first page, his expression darkening. It says here, Monica and her husband, Javier Dawson, are over $30,000 in debt, facing eviction, and only after discovering her children's inheritance did she pursue custody. The words landed like hammer blows. David's face twisted in fury. Rachel covered her mouth, shaking her head. Sophie muttered under her breath. So it was never about us. Monica lunged forward, her voice breaking. It's not true. I love my children. I just want them back. I cut her off, my voice rising with a power I hadn't felt in years. Then why, Monica, did you call me 1 week ago and threaten to accuse me of kidnapping unless I handed you custody and split the inheritance with you 50-50? The room exploded. The gallery gasped. Some shouted. The judge's gavel slammed repeatedly. Bang, bang, bang. Order. Judge Grant thundered. His eyes blazed as they fixed on Monica. Mrs. Cole, did you make such threats? Monica's lips quivered, but no sound came. I reached into my purse and pulled out a stapled packet of papers. My hand didn't tremble this time. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Your Honor, I said, handing the packet to the clerk. These are the printed text messages my daughter sent me after that phone call. If words spoken can be denied, words written cannot. The clerk delivered them to Judge Grant, who flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowing with each line. Then he cleared his throat. Mrs. Cole, please read some of these messages into the record. I adjusted my glasses, my voice clear and sharp. July 18th. Mom, think carefully. I'm the biological mother. Any judge will side with me. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Gasps echoed across the courtroom. I turned to the next page. July 20th. My lawyer says what you did could be considered kidnapping. You could go to jail if I press it. The murmurs turned into low outrage. A woman in the gallery whispered, threatening her own mother. Judge Grant's jaw tightened. Continue. I read the last one slowly, each word striking like a hammer. July 22nd. If you give me custody voluntarily, we can settle the inheritance. 50-50. You keep half for raising them. I'll keep half because I'm their mother. But if you force me to court, I'll take it all. The gallery erupted, voices rising like a wave crashing. Some cursed under their breath. Others shook their heads in disbelief. The gavel slammed. Bang, bang, bang. Order in the court. Judge Grant barked. His eyes, sharp as glass, turned to Monica. Did you send these messages? Monica's face crumpled. She stammered. I didn't mean them. I was desperate. But the damage was done. The truth was carved into paper. David leapt to his feet, fury boiling in his voice. So it was never about us. It was about money all along. Rachel sobbed openly now, covering her face. Sophie whispered, almost to herself. She tried to sell us off twice, once for $500, and now for $75. Monica collapsed into her chair, shaking uncontrollably. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm, but even he looked pale, as though the fight had already bled out of him. Judge Grant leaned back, folding his hands, his expression grim. This court has heard enough threats, enough lies, and enough abandonment to fill volumes. But before I rule, I want one thing made crystal clear. He turned his eyes to me. Mrs. Cole, do you wish to press criminal charges for extortion against your daughter? The room went dead silent, every eye swinging toward me. I reached into my purse and pulled out a stapled packet of papers. My hand didn't tremble this time. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Your Honor, I said, handing the packet to the clerk. These are the printed text messages my daughter sent me after that phone call. If words spoken can be denied, words written cannot. The clerk delivered them to Judge Grant, who flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowing with each line. Then he cleared his throat. Mrs. Cole, please read some of these messages into the record. I adjusted my glasses, my voice clear and sharp. July 18th. Mom, think carefully. I'm the biological mother. Any judge will side with me. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Gasps echoed across the courtroom. I turned to the next page. July 20th. My lawyer says what you did could be considered kidnapping. You could go to jail if I press it. The murmurs turned into low outrage. A woman in the gallery whispered, threatening her own mother. Judge Grant's jaw tightened. Continue. I read the last one slowly, each word striking like a hammer. July 22nd. If you give me custody voluntarily, we can settle the inheritance. 50-50. You keep half for raising them. I'll keep half because I'm their mother. But if you force me to court, I'll take it all. The gallery erupted, voices rising like a wave crashing. Some cursed under their breath. Others shook their heads in disbelief. The gavel slammed. Bang, bang, bang. Order in the court. Judge Grant barked. His eyes, sharp as glass, turned to Monica. Did you send these messages? Monica's face crumpled. She stammered. I didn't mean them. I was desperate. But the damage was done. The truth was carved into paper. David leapt to his feet, fury boiling in his voice. So it was never about us. It was about money all along. Rachel sobbed openly now, covering her face. Sophie whispered, almost to herself. She tried to sell us off twice, once for $500, and now for $75. Monica collapsed into her chair, shaking uncontrollably. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm, but even he looked pale, as though the fight had already bled out of him. Judge Grant leaned back, folding his hands, his expression grim. This court has heard enough threats, enough lies, and enough abandonment to fill volumes. But before I rule, I want one thing made crystal clear. He turned his eyes to me. Mrs. Cole, do you wish to press criminal charges for extortion against your daughter? The room went dead silent, every eye swinging toward me. Judge Grant adjusted his glasses, the silence in the room so heavy it pressed down on every chest. He tapped his pen once, then raised his voice with the solemn weight of justice. This court has reviewed the evidence, the photographs, the letters, the signed renunciation, and the threatening text messages. We have also heard the testimony of the 3 children, now young adults, whose voices ring clearer than any legal argument. He paused, letting his words settle like stones dropped into deep water. Therefore, this court rules as follows. The permanent legal guardianship of Mrs. Margaret Cole over minors Rachel Cole and Sophie Cole is confirmed. The custody petition filed by Mrs. Monica Cole is denied in full. Furthermore, a 5-year restraining order is hereby issued against Mrs. Monica Cole, prohibiting contact with the children or Mrs. Cole unless initiated by the children upon reaching adulthood. The gavel struck. Bang. The gallery erupted. Some gasped. Some whispered prayers. Some shook their heads at the fallen woman slumped in her chair. David stood immediately, crossing the aisle to me. He wrapped his arms around my shoulders, whispering, "We're safe now, Grandma, finally safe." Rachel joined him, burying her face into my neck. Sophie clung to my arm, her tears hot against my sleeve. For the first time in 13 years, I let myself exhale. Across the courtroom, Monica broke into hysterical sobs. Her lawyer tried to steady her, but she pushed him away, collapsing onto the table. "They're still my children," she cried, her voice raw, desperate. "You can't erase me from their lives." I turned toward her, my voice soft but unshakable. "You erased yourself, Monica, 13 years ago, with your own hand and your own words. All I ever did was protect what you abandoned." The judge tapped his gavel once more. "This court is adjourned." The bailiff called for order, but the sound barely registered. My grandchildren's arms were still around me, anchoring me to the moment. Relief flooded my veins, mixed with sadness as bitter as coffee left too long on the burner. As we stepped out of the courtroom, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but I kept walking, my head high. The truth had finally spoken louder than the lies. Yet deep in my chest, I knew the fight wasn't over. Monica's tears had not been the tears of surrender, they were the tears of a woman cornered. The hallway outside the courtroom smelled of old varnish and burnt coffee from the vending machine down the hall. My grandchildren clung to me like anchors, David at my left, Rachel at my right. Sophie gripping my hand as if afraid I might disappear. Reporters swarmed, microphones and flashing cameras stabbing the air. Mrs. Cole, how does it feel to win? Do you think your daughter deserves forgiveness? Will you press criminal charges after all? I kept my head high, lips pressed into the kind of smile that says nothing and everything at once. No comment was my armor. Then I saw her. Monica stood at the far end of the hallway, her lawyer trailing behind her like a ghost who wanted no part in the living. Her eyes locked on me, red-rimmed, swollen, desperate. For a second, she looked like the little girl who once begged me to braid her hair before school. "Mom," she croaked, her voice raw, cutting through the chaos. "Please, can we talk? Just you and me." David stepped forward instantly, blocking her path. "No, stay away from her." Rachel's face was pale, her tears fresh again. "Grandma, don't." She'll twist it, like always. But Sophie, sweet, fiery Sophie, stared hard at her mother. "Let her speak, but only with you, Grandma, not with us." The hallway fell into a hush, the press sensing fresh blood. Even the bailiff tensed, waiting for a cue. I straightened, my arthritis aching but my resolve firm. 5 minutes, I said, somewhere private. Monica's lawyer tried to intervene, but she shook him off, leading me toward a narrow alcove near the stairwell. My grandchildren stayed behind, their worried eyes burning into my back. Up close, Monica looked older than her 39 years, lines etched deep. Her foundation streaked with tears, her suit wrinkled from collapse. She clutched the railing as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I know I don't deserve it. But please, don't shut me out forever. I've made mistakes, terrible ones. But I've changed. I can change more. Just, don't erase me from their lives." Her words cracked like porcelain. For a fleeting second, I felt the mother's ache tugging at my chest. But then I remembered the letters, the silence, the threats. I took a deep breath. "Monica, forgiveness isn't the same as trust. You want me to open a door you nailed shut yourself 13 years ago." Her lip trembled. "What do I have to do to make it right?" Her question lingered between us, fragile and trembling. What do I have to do to make it right? I studied her, my daughter. My blood. The same girl who once hid scraped knees behind the couch so I wouldn't scold her. Now a grown woman begging in a courthouse stairwell. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes hollow, her pride shattered. I swallowed hard, then spoke with a steadiness I barely felt. "Monica, you can't buy your way back. You can't argue your way back. And you sure as heaven can't threaten your way back. If you want to make it right, start by facing the truth." Her brows knitted, her voice breaking. "What truth? That you abandoned your children. That you left them because a man told you to. That you formed another family and forgot the one you already had. That you only came back because of money." Each word struck like a lash. Monica flinched, her grip tightening on the railing until her knuckles turned white. Tears spilled freely, dripping onto the polished floor. "You think I don't know that?" she choked. "I replay it every night. I hear their cries in my dreams. I see their faces at 7, 5, and 3, and then I wake up and they're strangers to me. I live with that guilt. Mom, I live with it every damn day." I stepped closer, my voice softer now, but firm. "Then stop living with guilt and start living with responsibility. Get a job that isn't tied to a man's paycheck. Get help for that bitterness you carry. Learn how to be alone without crumbling. And maybe, someday, when my grandchildren are adults, they'll decide for themselves if they want to let you back in." Her eyes widened with a flicker of desperate hope. "So you're saying, there's a chance?" I shook my head slowly. "I'm saying it's not my choice. It's theirs. And until they're ready, if they're ever ready, you stay away." Her body sagged, as though the last of her fight drained out onto the courthouse floor. For the first time in years, Monica looked small to me, no longer a polished lawyer's client or a bitter opponent. Just a broken daughter standing in the ruins of her own decisions. "Mom," she whispered, almost childlike, "will you ever forgive me?" I took a breath, my chest tight with the weight of the years between us. Forgiveness, yes. Forgetting, no. And trusting again? That's not mine to give, it belongs to David, Rachel, and Sophie. Her sobs echoed down the stairwell, each one sharper than the last. I turned away before my own tears could betray me. My grandchildren were waiting, and they were the only ones who had never left. When I stepped back into the hallway, the noise of reporters and bystanders washed over me like a tide. But I only saw 3 faces, David, Rachel, and Sophie, waiting just a few feet away. Their eyes were fixed on me, searching for answers I wasn't sure how to give. David was the first to speak, his voice low, tense. "What did she say to you? Grandma? Did she threaten you again?" I shook my head. "No, not this time." Rachel gripped my arm. "Then what? What did she want?" "She wanted forgiveness," I said quietly. "She wanted to know if there was any chance left for her." Sophie's jaw clenched. "And what did you tell her?" I met her fierce young eyes, then looked at all 3 of them, their faces lined with hurt and hope and fear. I told her the truth, that forgiveness is possible. But trust is not mine to give. That choice belongs to you. The words hung in the air, heavier than the judge's gavel had been. Rachel's lips trembled. "She doesn't deserve another chance. She abandoned us. Grandma, she traded us like we were baggage she couldn't carry." David put a steady hand on her shoulder, though his own face was taut with anger. "I agree. She's only back because of the money. You were right to protect us. But Sophie surprised us all." She stepped closer, her voice softer, though fire still burned underneath. "I don't trust her. Not now. Maybe not ever. But a part of me." She hesitated, her voice breaking. "A part of me still wants to understand her. Not for her sake, for mine. Because I don't want to spend my life wondering if there's anything more than the woman who left us." The hallway went silent again, except for the clicking of cameras down the corridor. I pulled Sophie close, pressing her head against my shoulder. "Sweetheart, you don't have to decide today, or tomorrow, or ever, if you don't want to. What matters is you know you're safe. And you have the right to choose when you're ready." David nodded slowly, his anger softening just a fraction. "As long as she doesn't get to hurt us again." I looked each of them in the eye. That's why I asked for the restraining order. 5 years of peace, 5 years to grow, to live without fear. That is my promise to you. Rachel finally let out a long, shaky breath. "Then that's all I need." Behind us, I heard Monica's muffled sobs echoing from the stairwell. The sound cut deep, but I didn't turn back. My grandchildren had chosen me long ago, and today, the law had chosen us too. The courthouse felt like a battlefield we had just crawled out of, bruised, exhausted, but alive. That night, when we finally returned home, the quiet of my little house wrapped around us like a blanket. For the first time in months, the air wasn't thick with dread. Rachel set her backpack down and went straight to the kitchen, rummaging through the cupboards like she hadn't eaten in days. David flopped onto the couch, his tie hanging loose, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Sophie retreated to her room with her guitar, soft strums soon drifting through the walls like a lullaby for all of us. I lowered myself into my favorite armchair, my knees aching, but my heart lighter than it had been in years. The restraining order was signed. The guardianship was secure. My grandchildren were safe. For once, there would be no knocks at the door bringing subpoenas, no envelopes stuffed with threats, no fear that they might be ripped from the only home they knew. I closed my eyes and let myself imagine a different kind of future. David finishing college, Rachel finally writing that poetry book she kept tucked away in her drawer, Sophie standing on a stage with her guitar, her voice carrying farther than I ever could. A future built not on fear, but on possibility. And yet, even as peace settled into my bones, Monica's shadow lingered, her words in the stairwell replayed in my mind. "So you're saying, there's a chance?" The sound of her sobs clung to me, sharper than any insult she had ever thrown. I reminded myself that compassion didn't mean letting her back in. Compassion could coexist with boundaries. But late that night, after the children had gone to bed, I found myself staring at the phone on the counter, wondering if she was sleeping in a warm bed or crying alone in the dark. I shook the thought away. My duty wasn't to her anymore, it was to the 3 young souls who depended on me. And for the first time in 13 years, I could look at them and say with certainty, we are safe. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling across the kitchen table. Rachel was already scribbling in her notebook, Sophie humming as she tuned her guitar, David frying eggs with a confidence that made me smile. For a moment, I just stood there in the doorway, watching them. My heart whispered the truth I had always known. They weren't just my grandchildren. They were my children, my life's second chance, my proof that love, when chosen, is stronger than blood when abandoned. But I also knew this story wasn't finished. Life has a way of circling back. And Monica's shadow was still out there, waiting. 3 months passed. Life had begun to knit itself back together like a quilt patched over old tears. David was thriving at college, sending me photos of textbooks stacked higher than his head. Rachel had entered a citywide poetry contest, her verses sharp as glass but tender as prayer. And Sophie, my little songbird, was playing her guitar at a neighborhood cafe on Friday nights, her laughter spilling out into the air like music itself. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to breathe without glancing over my shoulder. The restraining order had given us peace. The house felt lighter, the children freer, until the knock came. It was Mrs. Harris from next door, holding a folded newspaper in her trembling hands. Her face wore the look of someone who wasn't sure whether to speak or stay silent. "Margaret, I thought you should see this." My stomach tightened as I unfolded the paper. On the second page, there she was, Monica's face staring back at me in a mugshot. The headline screamed, "Local woman arrested for fraud and debt evasion." The article painted the picture: unpaid loans, credit card schemes, eviction notices. Javier Dawson had left her months ago, taking their son Paul with him. Alone, desperate, and drowning in debt, Monica had tried to forge documents for quick cash. She was caught, and now she faced trial. I sank into my chair, the newspaper shaking in my hands. Rachel came in from the porch, curiosity flashing in her eyes. "Grandma, what's wrong?" I hesitated, but there was no hiding it. I handed her the paper. Her eyes widened as she read. David and Sophie soon gathered around, their faces mirroring a storm of emotions: shock, anger, pity. David's jaw tightened. "So she didn't change?" "Not really." Rachel's voice wavered. "She looks lost, like she doesn't even recognize herself anymore." Sophie hugged her arms to her chest. "Does this mean she'll go to prison?" I folded the paper, pressing it flat with both palms. "That's not for us to decide. Life has its own way of handing out consequences." But deep inside, a war raged. Relief that she couldn't hurt us anymore, pity for the broken woman she had become, and a grief I couldn't quite name. She was my daughter. No amount of truth, no mountain of pain, could erase that fact. As night fell, I sat alone on the porch, the cicadas humming their eternal chorus. I thought of the courtroom, of Monica's tears in the stairwell, of her whisper, "So you're saying, there's a chance?" Maybe once there had been. But chances were fragile things. Mishandled, they vanish forever. The next evening, the newspaper still sat folded on the kitchen counter like a wound nobody dared to touch. The children ate quietly, their forks clinking against their plates. No music from Sophie's guitar. No scribbling from Rachel's notebook. No teasing from David, just silence. Finally, Rachel broke it. Her voice was soft, uncertain. "Grandma, do you think we should visit her?" The question dropped into the room like a stone into water, sending ripples through each of us. David set his fork down hard. "No, absolutely not. She made her choices. She lied. She threatened. And now she's paying the price. Visiting her won't change any of that." Rachel's eyes shone, caught between guilt and longing. "But she's still our mother. David, what if she's all alone in there? What if she really is ready to change this time?" Sophie leaned back in her chair, arms folded tight, her voice sharp. "She's always been alone, even when we were kids. She was alone, alone in her depression, alone in her selfishness, alone in the lies she chose. Why should we carry that weight again?" The air thickened, each word pressing harder on my chest. I cleared my throat, my hands wrapped around my teacup like it could steady me. "Children," I said gently, "this isn't an easy choice. Visiting her might bring you peace, or it might reopen wounds you've worked so hard to heal. There's no right or wrong here, only what each of you is ready for." David shook his head firmly. "I'm not ready, not now, maybe not ever." Rachel whispered, almost to herself, "I think I need to see her. Not for her, for me. To understand, to put the ghosts to rest." Sophie looked at me, her eyes blazing. And you, Grandma? Would you go? The room stilled. 3 pairs of eyes, each filled with a different storm, waited for my answer. I looked at the folded newspaper on the counter, then at the 3 faces that had become my whole world. My voice came out quiet but steady. I don't know yet, but if I do go, it won't be for Monica. It will be for us, for the truth, for the closure we might still need. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful, waiting. The decision came 2 days later, carried on the kind of silence that fills a house before a storm. Rachel appeared in the kitchen with her coat already on, her notebook tucked under her arm. Her voice was soft but steady. Grandma, I want to go, to see her, but I don't want to go alone. David immediately pushed back his chair. Rachel, don't. You'll regret it. She'll twist your words. She always does. Sophie crossed her arms, eyes narrowing. If you go, she'll see it as a victory. She'll think she still has power over us. Rachel shook her head. It's not about her. It's about me. I can't carry this weight forever. Wondering if she's changed. Wondering if she even remembers us. I need to look her in the eyes and know. Then her gaze fell on me. Grandma, will you come with me? The room went still. My heart ached for the girl standing in front of me, so young, yet already carrying the burden of abandonment like a second skin. I set my teacup down, the porcelain clinking against the saucer. Yes, I said at last. I'll go with you. David exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Then I'm not stopping you. But don't expect me to join. I can't face her. Not yet. Sophie muttered under her breath. Or ever. But she didn't argue further. The next morning, Rachel and I drove to the county jail. The gray concrete building loomed like a fortress, the barbed wire above it glinting in the winter sun. Inside, the smell of disinfectant and metal clung to everything. We were led into a visitation room lined with scratched plastic tables. A guard gestured for us to sit. Rachel's hands trembled in her lap, her notebook unopened. My own heart thudded with a rhythm I hadn't felt since that day in court. And then the door opened. Monica shuffled in, her orange jumpsuit hanging loosely on her frame. Her wrists were shackled, her hair pulled back, her face thinner, lined with exhaustion and shame. When she saw us, her steps faltered. Rachel, she whispered, her voice breaking, as if the name itself were a prayer she'd been afraid to say aloud. Rachel inhaled sharply, her fingers gripping mine. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Finally, she looked at her mother and said the words she'd been holding for years. Why? The question cracked through the visitation room like lightning, just one word. Sharp and unforgiving. Why? Monica's shackled hands trembled on the table. Her eyes darted from Rachel to me, as if hoping I'd rescue her. But I stayed silent. This was not my question to answer. She drew a ragged breath. Because I was weak, she whispered. Because I didn't know how to be a mother. Because I thought running away was easier than facing how broken I was. Rachel's jaw clenched. We were children. We didn't need perfect, we needed you. Tears spilled down Monica's cheeks. I know. Every day I wake up and I see your faces. You, David, Sophie, you were so small. And I left you with nothing but fear and hunger. I told myself you'd be better off without me. That mom could do what I couldn't. And I chose a man instead of you. Her words came out jagged, raw, stripped of excuses. Rachel's voice shook, but it held steel. And when you came back, it wasn't for us. It was for money. You threatened Grandma. You tried to tear us away from the only person who's ever stood by us. Monica dropped her gaze, shame thick as chains around her. I know. I thought the inheritance was my way to fix everything. But it was just another way of proving I hadn't changed. Rachel's tears finally spilled. So what do you want from me now? Forgiveness? A clean slate? Do you think one apology erases 13 years of silence? Monica shook her head violently. No, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I wanted to see your face again. To know that despite everything, you're alive, you're okay, that maybe one day, when you're ready, you'll let me earn a place in your life again. The room pulsed with silence. The guard stood watchful by the door. But in that moment it was just us, 3 generations bound by blood, divided by choices. Rachel wiped her tears with the back of her sleeve. Her voice softened, but it didn't bend. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you. Mom, but I needed to hear you say it. To admit the truth. Now I can stop wondering. She rose to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. That's all I needed. Monica reached out instinctively, the chains clinking as she tried to close the distance. Rachel, please. But Rachel shook her head, stepping back. Don't beg, don't promise, just be better, if you can, that's all. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she turned to me. Grandma, I'm ready to go. I stood slowly, my eyes meeting Monica's one last time. You heard her, the rest is up to you. And with that, Rachel and I walked out, leaving Monica in the echo of her own choices. The car hummed quietly as we drove away from the county jail. The world outside painted in dull gray skies and rain-streaked windows. Rachel sat in the passenger seat, her notebook unopened on her lap, her arms folded tightly across her chest. She hadn't spoken since we left the visitation room. I kept my eyes on the road, giving her the silence she seemed to need. But inside, my chest ached with the weight of her unspoken words. Finally, she exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked so small. Grandma, not like the woman who threatened us. Not like the monster I built up in my head. Just small, broken. I nodded, my hands steady on the wheel. Prison has a way of stripping people down to what they really are. Rachel turned her face to the window. Part of me hates her. For what she did. For the years she stole from us. But another part, she shook her head, tears blurring her voice. Another part feels sorry for her. And I don't know what to do with that. I reached across the console and laid my hand over hers. That's because you're human, my love. Anger and compassion can live in the same heart. One doesn't cancel the other. She bit her lip. Do you think she meant it? Grandma? Do you think she was really sorry? I let the question hang in the air, the rhythm of the windshield wipers filling the pause. I think she regrets. Regret and repentance aren't the same. Regret is about what you lost. Repentance is about who you become. Only time will tell which one she carries. Rachel leaned back in her seat, her tears drying into streaks on her cheeks. At least now I know. I don't have to wonder anymore. I saw her, I heard her, and I can finally decide for myself who she is to me. And who is she? I asked gently. Rachel stared at her hands, then at me. She's my mother by blood. But you're my mom by choice. And choice means more. The words filled me with a warmth so fierce it nearly broke me. I squeezed her hand tighter, blinking against the tears clouding my own eyes. As the miles slipped by, the rain began to ease, a pale stripe of sunlight breaking through the clouds. And in that fragile light, I felt something shift, not an ending, not forgiveness, but the beginning of peace. When Rachel and I walked back into the house, David and Sophie were waiting in the living room. The television was on, but muted, its flickering light painting both their faces with nervous anticipation. David stood the moment he saw us. Well? His voice was sharp, his eyes locked on his sister. What happened? Rachel slipped off her coat slowly, as though every movement carried weight. She admitted it, she said at last. Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. She admitted everything, leaving us. Choosing Javier, coming back for the money. No excuses, just the truth. Sophie crossed her arms tighter. And did it change anything? Rachel sat down on the couch, her notebook clutched against her chest like a shield. It didn't change the past. Nothing can. But it changed me. I don't have to wonder anymore. I don't have to ask myself if she cared. She didn't, not enough. Not then. But at least now I know she knows it. Too. David paced, shaking his head. So what? You feel sorry for her now? Rachel looked up at him, her voice calm but resolute. Yes, I feel sorry for her. And I also don't want her in my life. Both can be true. Sophie's eyes softened, though her jaw stayed firm. I don't need to see her. I don't need her to admit anything. I already knew what mattered, that she left. And Grandma stayed. That's all I need. David finally stopped pacing, his fists unclenching at his sides. He looked at me, his face torn between anger and relief. And you, Grandma? Did it change anything for you? I settled into my chair, feeling all their eyes on me. It didn't change what I already knew. I raised you three because she chose not to. I'd do it again 1,000 times. But hearing her admit the truth, it gave Rachel peace. And that matters. David sighed heavily. Dropping into the chair across from me, Sophie leaned her head against Rachel's shoulder. For the first time in months, the three of them weren't pulling in different directions, they were finding a fragile harmony. Each with their own truth, yet bound together by something stronger. I looked at them, my heart swelling with pride and sorrow in equal measure. Children, I said softly, your mother may never be who you need her to be. But you have each other. And you have me. That's our family. And it's enough. Silence followed, not heavy this time, but warm. And for a fleeting moment, I thought, maybe this was what healing looked like, not forgetting. Not excusing, but choosing love where it was given freely. 1 year later, the seasons had circled back again. My garden was alive with tomatoes and basil. The same plot that had seen me through storms of every kind. But this year, I wasn't tending it alone. Sophie knelt beside me, her guitar set aside on the porch, her hands in the dirt. She laughed as she tried to coax a stubborn weed from the soil. David came home for the weekend. Taller somehow, shoulders broader from his first year of engineering courses. He carried himself with a quiet pride. A young man who had fought shadows and was finally stepping into the light. Rachel sat on the porch swing with her notebook, reading aloud the poem that had just won her a state-level award. Her words wove through the warm air like music, fragile and strong all at once. I sat back on my knees, wiping sweat from my brow, and looked at the three of them, their laughter, their bickering, their sheer aliveness. My heart ached in the sweetest way. The restraining order had given us peace. No phone calls, no letters, no sudden shadows at the door. Monica was still serving her time, and though her name was sometimes whispered by neighbors, in this house she had become only a distant echo. But echoes can linger. Every now and then, I caught Rachel staring off after reading one of her mother's old letters. Sophie would strum a haunting tune. Her eyes clouded. David would fall silent, clenching his jaw whenever Monica's name slipped into conversation. Each of them carried their scars differently, but they carried them with strength. I realized then that healing isn't about erasing the past, it's about learning to walk with it without stumbling. And that's what we were doing. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with fire and gold, I called them to the table. We ate together, eggs, tomatoes, bread still warm from the oven. Between bites of laughter and teasing, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The courtrooms, the tears, the yellow envelope that had held our truth. And I thought of Monica. Not with hatred anymore, not even with anger, just with the quiet resignation that some people cannot be who you need them to be. I raised my glass of sweet tea and smiled at my grandchildren. To us, I said, to family, not the one you're given, but the one you fight for. They raised their glasses in unison. To family. The cicadas hummed, the sky dimmed, and for the first time in 13 years, I felt the kind of peace that doesn't ask for permission. I sit at the same worn kitchen table where so much of my life has unfolded, letters read, bills paid, tears shed, and laughter shared. The house is quiet tonight, but not lonely. In the next rooms, I can hear the soft rhythm of Sophie's guitar, Rachel whispering lines of poetry to herself, and David tapping away at his laptop, building the future brick by brick. 13 years ago, I thought my life was ending when my daughter dropped her children on my doorstep. What I didn't know was that it was beginning again. Every fever I nursed, every scraped knee I bandaged, every graduation and birthday I celebrated without their mother, those moments became the truest chapters of my story. And here's what I've learned. Love isn't proven by blood. Love is proven by staying when it would be easier to leave. It's proven by sleepless nights, by the choice to show up again and again when no one else will. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean opening the door to someone who has proven they'll burn the house down. Forgiveness is letting go of the anger so it doesn't poison you, but keeping the boundaries strong so the people you love remain safe. And justice? Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes justice is simply watching the natural consequences of someone's choices unfold while you protect your own peace. If you carry anything from my story, let it be this. You don't have to be perfect to be a protector. You just have to choose love every single day, even when it costs you, especially when it costs you. Because at the end of everything, when the courtrooms are empty, When the arguments fade, when the shadows of betrayal finally settle, the family you've built with your hands and your heart is the only legacy that matters. And that, my friends, is enough.